All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Racing Form handicapping session for the Breeders' Cup with our special guests, Jay Privman and Mike Vesce. Jay, how are you doing today?
Good, guys. How are you?
Doing very well. Talking Breeders' Cup, doing nothing but talking Breeders' Cup and a little bit of baseball, and not talked out just yet. Jay, of course, is the national correspondent for Daily Racing Form. You know him for his fine work at DRF, in the paper, on the website, also the great work he does for NBC. Quite an honor to have him carving out an hour of his week to spend with us. Our other guest I'm super excited to have on, was fortunate to have him as a guest at one of the seminars I was lucky enough to do up at Saratoga this summer. He's a clocker for Daily Racing Form along with Mike Welsh. Mike Vesce. Mike, how are you today?
I'm doing well, gentlemen. Thanks for having me.
All right, and of course Mike Hogan, as always, DRF Director of Product Marketing, joining us, producing, sharing his screen as we go through the races. He'll be showing a lot of the different bells and whistles in Formulator, an indispensable handicapping tool. Also want to mention that our webinar today is sponsored by Keeneland Select. We're going to be able to take some questions from the audience. Mike is demonstrating right now, Mike Hogan, showing that the tool by which you can ask questions, so feel free to do that. We'll try to get to them race by race. And without further ado, I think we should just dive right in to Friday's races. Mike Vesce, will start with you for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. Have you had the opportunity to clap eyes on most of these horses at this point? And what are you thinking about this race from a handicapping perspective?
Well, the thing is here is, especially these turf races, you put a lot of credence into the Euros, and to be honest with you, I haven't done my proper research on these horses yet, so I'm going to give you kind of my perspective on the New York horses that I've seen. Reports have just been filed, and I haven't gotten a chance to read those thoroughly as well, and Mike Welsh has a bunch of information from California. But there's a few horses that I've seen, most notably is Favorable Outcome, who was making his first start on the turf for trainer Chad Brown, finished third last time out in the Champagne. He and actually Ticonderoga breezed together on October 29th. It was an okay breeze. I thought Favorable Outcome got the better of Ticonderoga, who's actually gotten a win on turf. Now the last 2 weeks on the turf, you have to realize that there was a lot of give in the ground at Belmont. So that really doesn't translate well over to Santa Anita. But I thought Favorable Outcome went pretty easily in that last workout as in Ticonderoga was being asked in it. So I thought Favorable Outcome was a little bit better, also, although he didn't really blow me away on the turf. So I'm going to kind of take a wait-and-see approach on him.
Sounds fair. Jay Privman, you're known not only as a fine writer, but a fantastic handicapper as well. What do you see as the chances of a U.S.-trained runner winning this race as opposed to one of the Europeans who typically hold such a strong hand here?
I think it's very good, actually. I don't know that the horses that have come over from Europe this year are quite the killers that we've seen in the past, and I do think the American-based runners, both in this race and then later on when we discuss the Juvenile Fillies grass race, I think they're both pretty strong groups, a cut above what we usually see. So I'm actually, my top three in the Juvenile Turf are all American-based runners. I actually went with Oscar Performance. I think there's a misnomer with this horse that he has to have the lead, and from where he's drawn, it looks to me like he's going to get a first over trip outside of well-abled. And I like the way he relaxed on the lead in his races and then kicked clear powerfully in his last two starts. So I think he can win right back. I think you're going to get a couple more points on the board than you normally would, because I think there's a perception out there that, well, he needs the lead because of the trips that he's gotten last time. But I don't know that that's necessarily the case with him. The other horses in here that I'm going to use in an exacta box are Big Score, ran very well in all three of his races here, including his most recent start when he won a stake race. And the horse has really touted himself out here all week. Has been Good Samaritan. He's 2 for 2 for Bill Mott, and he's looked fantastic in all of his training leading up to the races here at Santa Anita. So I'm going to be boxing those three in an exacta, and I'm going to be playing Oscar Performance in the windfalls because I think his price is going to be a little higher than it should be.
Terrific. I love the addition of the specific wagering thoughts. A great way to help out folks either tuned into this webinar live or watching the replay later. You can access all the Breeders' Cup webinars we've done this week and all the webinars we've ever done at drf.com/YouTube if folks are interested in checking that out. Let's move on to the 7th race at Santa Anita on Friday, the BC Dirt Mile. Jay, I'll just ask you point blank. Is Dortmund a single in here?
I don't know that he's a single. I think he is deservedly perceived as the most likely winner of the race, and he would be the largest percentage of what I'm going to use in sequential rangers will be on him. But I do think Gunrunner has a very big chance in here. There is some pace for him to run into. He's looked extremely well all week. He's trained great, and I think he's going to fire a big race. So I do think Dortmund's the most likely winner, but I'm also going to have a fairly significant backup position on Gunrunner in here. And basically, if anybody else wins, I'm in trouble. The only other horse in here that I give a little bit of a look to is Vijak, just because I respect him so much, because he just seems to fire every time. Both of his races out here, one on dirt and one on grass, were both good races, and he drew well on the rail. You know, if Run Happy wins, I lose. So that's kind of where I'm at in this race. And I'm against some of the late-running sprinter types that are stretching out, like Tom's Ready and Tam Marcuse. I'm going to gamble that they're not going to reproduce the same form around 2 turns.
Yeah, that's a tough game, and I can definitely understand that position. Mike Vesce, how about you? How do you see this year's Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile?
I'd really have to piggyback off of what Jay says here. I'm gonna use Dortmund on top. Gunrunner, I've been a big fan of as a clocker for a long time now. He really impressed me up at Saratoga. And it seems like actually he's been involved in these really fast races as 3-year-olds, especially the last 3 or 4 of them. And it seems like he's just marginally improving. So, and as Jay knows, he's a great workhorse. He's seen them as well as Mike Welsh too. So I'm kind of in that same mode of Dortmund as an A, Gunrunner as a solid backup B. And if you're playing exactas and tries, I think Tam Marcuse is a pretty good play to back up to round those out for you.
All right, makes sense. Let's move on to the 8th race, the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf. Mike, we'll keep it with you. Are your thoughts any more fully formed in this juvenile race, or are you taking a wait-and-see approach as well?
No, I mean, I'm really not taking a wait-and-see approach. That first race that Jay made some really great points, and all those horses that he spoke about, his top 3 there, have all been training fantastically. There is one note I wanted to make in this race. You see that New Money Honey defeated Rimska last time out in the Miss Grillo. I think Rimska they've been working out together the last 2 or 3 weeks now. Rimska's gotten the better of her each and every single time. Like I said, I don't know if that's a function, a little bit of the given the ground, although New Money Honey did win on a yielding course at in the Miss Grillo. Maybe Rimska was training with Lasix, and now she gets Lasix for the first time. But if you're looking just from a workouts perspective, Rimska's been much better than New Money Honey lately. Coasted is another horse that I was high on earlier in the year. The last few workouts haven't really thrilled me all that much. And, you know, I've been a fan of Lull as well, but La Coronel really put her out last time out. So those are my American interpretations of these horses. And again, I have to go back on these Euros to really delve into what they've done.
I would argue that Europe holds a stronger hand here than in the corresponding race for the Colts. Jay Privman, do you agree with that assessment, and what are your general thoughts on this race?
I do think the Europeans in here are better. I think the Phillies are better than the group that came over for the Colts, but I still think that the American-based runners in here are kind of above what we usually see in here. I like New Money Honey off of her races, but the horse that I picked is La Coronel. The draw did her no favors. But I thought her race at Keeneland was really eye-catching in the way that she won that race. But to me, she's almost, in the way I evaluate the race, almost even with New Money Honey, because even though La Coronel beat her in their one and only start, that was New Money Honey's first race, and the Cornell had already had 2 runs. Granted, they were on dirt. She's a much better grass horse, but still, you have to figure she was probably a little more fit for that matchup. They've both come back and won since, and I think they're both going to run big races. And certainly from the draw, New Money Honey got the best of the draw, but I was just so taken with the way La Cornell won at Keeneland, I put her on top. I have kind of a weirdo as my long shot bomber, but she needs to get into the race. I actually picked Conta Partiro in third. She's the first also eligible, and as of now, she's not in. But entries are taken on Monday, and as we've seen even today with some news that we'll be discussing on the Saturday entry time and scratch time, which is Friday morning at 8 o'clock. And this horse had a terrible trip in the Surfer Girl, and I thought if she got in, she'd be just a giant price. So if she gets in, use her. If she doesn't get in, she's in a downhill race on Saturday, and you can gamble on her there. Of the Euros, I like Hydrangea best. I just thought her form looked like the best of the Euros, and that's who I would promote into my third spot if Conta Partiro doesn't get in.
Possible bonus tip there if Conta Partiro doesn't get in on the Saturday card from Jay. We definitely appreciate that. We've talked a lot of all the talk we've done this week about all these races. No race has consumed more verbiage percentage-wise than the Breeders' Cup Distaff. Our friend and podcast co-host Jonathan Kinchin has joked that he's lost friendships because of this race. I can't wait to hear what you two guys have to say about the BC Distaff. Jay, we'll start with you.
This is really an easy one for me because I'm not going to try and be smarter than the next guy. I'm using the big 3 in equal weight on my sequential wagers because I think there are scenarios by which Songbird, Beholder, and Stellar Wind all could be victorious. I did pick for the paper Stellar Wind only because I think she's going to be the highest price of the 3, and she's beaten Beholder in their last 2 starts. But Beholder has trained great all week. Songbird is undefeated and I think has a pace advantage in here. So I could see scenarios where all 3 of them win, and I'm just not, from a betting standpoint, I'm not going to try and get cute here. It's hard for me to make a win bet on any of them because I could see any of them winning, and I'm just hoping to be alive to all 3. And I guess at that point I'd be hoping for the best price, which I think will be Stellar Wind.
Mike Vesce, the argument against Songbird seems to have to do with figure-oriented players and the fact that she, despite the fact she's going to be the favorite, hasn't run as fast on paper as the big 2. Of course, races aren't run on paper, they're run on the track, and Songbird fans like myself will point to the fact of the way that she moves, the way that she's finished races with the double handful more often than not, suggesting there's more improvement here. Are you buying the hype on Songbird, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, the speed figures that I use, really, she's not that much slower than Stellar Wind or Beholder. In fact, they're pretty much on par. And as you mentioned, the way in which she got to those speed figures, all very easily, I think there is more than, this is obviously her toughest test yet, but I think there's a little bit more than what we've actually seen from Songbird, as crazy as that might seem. I do like Stellar Wind. I do like Beholder. The filly that I'm going to actually key in exactas and tries is Forever Unbridled. She has never gotten any kind of pace set up in her life, really, especially these last 3 races. She's gotten on all kinds of trouble. Dallas Stewart has done a very good job with her spacing out these races. She's trained well, according to my sources at Churchill Downs. I think she's a great key for exotics in exactas and tries, maybe a little bit for the win, but at a square price, I'm going to try to get a big exacta try to get Forever Unbridled in there.
Sounds like a logical approach and a great way to close out the Breeders' Cup races on Friday. Mike Hogan, before we move on to Breeders' Cup Saturday, do we have any questions from the audience, or do you have any questions yourself for either of the guys?
Well, there was a question that just came in from Matt Scarlatta from Mike Vesce about using workouts, and he wants to know, do you recommend people lean more into workout oppressions in the juvenile races versus something like that in the distaff with horses that maybe have a little bit more established form?
That's a great point, and naturally, the 2-year-olds are improving or regressing at a much greater rate than the older horses. So, yeah, I do put a little bit more stock into it, but you also have to put it in a scenario maybe it's just a maintenance move for the 2-year-old, so it's not as important as maybe a major work for a 5-year-old that's coming off a layoff. So the whole situation matters, but long and short of it, yeah, you put in a little bit more. You put a little bit more stock into a 2-year-old workout.
Well, that's going to segue perfectly into our first race on Saturday, because we'll keep it with talking about juveniles, in this case the BC Juvenile Fillies. Mike, we'll let you piggyback off that answer with your thoughts on this race.
Yeah, there's the one filly really that I've been really high on all along is Yellow Agate for trainer Christophe Clement. She just trained like a really nice filly throughout. Her last work, October 27th, she looked like $1 million. She was dappled out. She just was fit as a fiddle. And I think she was a little bit against the track last time as well in the Frisette. So I think she can improve. We haven't seen the best of her yet. With all this being said, there is that home court advantage in California, and you may want to lean a little bit towards those fillies and mares. But from the fillies that I've seen in New York, I really have to go with Yellow Agate. I've seen Sweet Loretta plenty of times. She really doesn't jump off the page when I'm watching her workouts. So of the New York contingent, Yellow Agate trained very well. And Jameson Ginger and Colorful Charades actually worked together on the 27th, and I thought Jameson and Ginger was much the best of the pair.
Some excellent info there, and I like that idea you bring up, Mike, about the potential for a home field advantage for the local contingent. Jay, you've gotten to see most of these fillies, certainly the West Coast ones. Is that an idea that you're taking with you in this race specifically, and the Breeders' Cup races in general, the thought that horses who've run over Santa Anita might have a little bit of an edge when it comes to these Breeders' Cup races?
I think that's true. I do think that the horses out here have a little bit of an edge. They just get to walk out of their stall and come over here and race instead of having to ship in. And if the horse has good form over this track and is based here, I think that's a big edge. And I think in the case specifically in this race, I think it'll help horses like Noted and Quoted and With Honors to have raced over this track already. And I think both of those horses will run well. But I like a mild upsetter in here. I went with Voladorna. I thought her maiden race was sensational. It was run on the same day as the Alcibiades, and it was run at a faster time. It was only her second start, and I think she's got room to improve off of it. Being by Curlin, it would just stand to reason that she's going to continue to move forward. And this race, to me, looks like it's got some pace in it for her to run into, especially with Baffert entering American Gal, who's on the outside, is coming out of 2 sprints, just has to go from out there. And I would think both of Rudy Rodriguez's fillies are going to be at least forwardly placed early, and there's other horses in here with speed, so I think she's going to have some pace to run into, and I think she can pull off a mild upset in here. I like Noted and Quoted best of the West Coast horses, and I picked her second, then with Honors and American Gal. So I like 3 Western horses after Valadorna because I think the race shape kind of flatters her, and I think she's an up-and-coming horse who you're going to get a little bit of a better price on than some of the horses that have been running in stakes races.
I can't think of a reporter who'd have a better perspective on Bob Baffert than you, Jay, whether it's from the work you've done in Southern California or, of course, covering the Triple Crown races for Daily Racing Form. Seems a little unusual for him to be bringing American Gal back so quickly off that last effort. From what you read of him, sometimes I feel like when a trainer does something unusual, I almost see it as a positive because they're such a good trainer, they know their horse, they wouldn't put them where they don't belong. Sometimes it can obviously be seen as a negative. It's not something that it's not a club they usually have in their bag. What's your specific impression with Baffert and American Gal and her overall chances here?
I think it's a positive. She was intended to run in the Del Mar Debutante, and in her last work before that race, she had a minor foot issue that caused her to miss that race. And so they had to kind of regroup with her, and that's why she didn't run again until a couple of weeks ago. But she was so good that day, and she came back and breathed so sharp this week with Mike Smith, who's going to ride her, that they decided to roll the dice here. It's obviously a big ask off 2 sprints and a wide draw against more seasoned fillies in here. But to me, Bob is a very instinctive kind of trainer, and when he's very successful when he makes moves like this, or at least the horses run well, even if they don't win, and I expect her to run a good race.
All right, good stuff. Let's move on to the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf. Jay, we'll keep it with you. Potential real stuff of storybooks and Hollywood movies here with the Lady Eli saga. Do you think it's going to be a happy end to this amazing story for this filly who's already overcome so much and proven so much in her short career?
Well, it's already a happy ending because she got back to the races, and she's run 2 terrific races, including a victory last time. But you know, when we put our money through the windows, we have to dispense of our emotion and be cold, hard realists. And I think she can absolutely win the race, and I'm certain that she's going to be a complete underlay based on her chances of winning the race. So because of that, I'm going to try and beat her. And if there was nothing else in here that you thought was worthy of it, then maybe you're just sort of grasping at straws. But I think there's a couple of Euros that have come in with excellent form that I think are going to be very, very tough to beat in here. Because let's face it, overall, the American female grass division this year has been moderate, I think. And Lady Eli is a great story, and she's going to take money, and she could certainly win. But I think she's going to be shorter than the morning line price that she was. And I like other horses in here. I think these Europeans that are coming over are a really strong group, led by Seventh Heaven from the Aidan O'Brien juggernaut, with the best jockey in the world, Ryan Moore, aboard for her. She's had good form. And one of the moves I like to see with European horses that come over for the Breeders' Cup are horses that look like they were pointed for the Breeders' Cup. When they get a little bit of a late fall or late summer, early fall kind of freshening, get a prep in and then come over. And that's the pattern that Seventh Heaven has coming into this race. And I think you'll see her run well. She disappointed a little bit last time, but she had a trip, and her 2 races prior to me are good enough to win. But the other horses here that I give a long look to is Queen's Trust, because she's kind of on the same schedule that Seventh Heaven was on for this race, and she was running against just the top of the top over there, second to Minding in the Nassau Stakes, and then finishing behind Seventh Heaven and Found in the Yorkshire Oaks. That's just sensational form, and I think that those 2 are better value than Lady Eli. So that's how I look at the race. I've got Seventh Heaven on top. I've got Queen's Trust second, and I've got Lady Eli third.
Makes perfect sense to me. Folks interested should definitely check out the tape of that Champions Day Filly and Mare Stakes from Ascot. I agree with you, Jay. Trips for both of those horses behind just the riding clinic put on by Frankie Dettori on Journey. It's tape worth watching if folks want to go to YouTube and have a look. Mike Vesce, what are your thoughts in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf?
Well, listen, like I said, I usually favor the European horses, and I really have to get into these over the next day or two. But real quick about Lady Eli, I've been a huge fan of hers since day one as a 2-year-old. I didn't really love the way she was going into the Flower Bowl. I thought maybe she wasn't quite back to Lady Eli. She wins the race, and she's come back unbelievable ever since her last 2 workouts. She was with C. Khaleesi both times. C. Khaleesi was very good. Lady Eli has looked amazing, especially that last work. She looked like $1 million, and if she won the Flower Bowl the way she did, training the way she did, is it possible this is her 3rd start off a long layoff? Chad Brown might have her as good as she's ever been, and I hear you, Jay. She's going to be a short price, but she is certainly a major, major player in here. And, Jay made some really good points with the Euros, but Lady Eli is just doing amazing.
That's so great to hear, and what a race this is shaping up to be. I think for multi-race wagers, those 3 will be all over my tickets, and I just can't wait from a sporting point of view to see how Lady Eli shapes up against 2 proper Group 1 fillies coming from abroad. Going to just be great. The 6th race, the Sprint, features a key scratch that Jay alluded to early. Unfortunately, Lord Nelson not going to be participating, so I think that brings us down to a field of 7 here. Mike Vesce, is this a race you're looking forward to betting, or is it more of a watch race at this point for you?
Yeah, I don't have too many strong opinions really in here. I'm against Refrong. I thought he was with the track last time out in the King's Bishop. He's a 3-year-old now facing older. He got away with a pretty easy lead last time as well. AP Indian is obviously a major player in here. He's gotten really good at the right time. Masochistic, according to Mike Walsh, has been training absolutely fantastic. And Limousine Liberal is a horse that he was given an A, a straight A on the Clocker report out of Keeneland for Saturday, which is unheard of. But he loves Keeneland. He's like 10 lengths better there. So he's a real hard horse to figure out. So maybe in a race like this, I'll use in picks and just put AP Indian and Masochistic on top, and then just use the rest of the field as B's and C's.
Some terrific stuff there, and I'm glad you referred to the workout report. Mike Hogan, is the workout report available for Friday yet on drf.com, or is it going to be a few more hours?
No, it's available. It's ready. If you've purchased it, go to download it. If you haven't purchased it, you can purchase and then download immediately. Mike did a great job getting it ready early. Usually it's available the day before and usually the afternoon before. It was available yesterday, so you've got it well in advance. A lot of great information in there.
Absolutely. I'm going to be checking that out myself as soon as we get off the air here. Jay Privman, your thoughts on this year's Breeders' Cup Sprint?
Yeah, I was really looking forward to seeing Lord Nelson run because I've just really been a fan of the way they've managed him this year, but unfortunately he's got a setback that's going to keep him out of this race. To me, it was a 2-horse race between him and Masochistic. I mean, there's a difference between Eastern Speed and Western Speed. When you come out to Santa Anita, you better put your big boy pants on to run against these guys. And Masochistic is a fast horse. I love where he drew outside of the other speeds. He should get a great trip from out there, as you guys were alluding to. As Mike Vesce mentioned, this horse is trained fantastic. We've all been impressed by him, myself, Mike Walsh, everybody. I mean, you can't help but like what he's done, and I think he's going to run a terrific race. And now that his main rival's out of there, to me, the race goes through him. So I'm rooting for him, and very much rooting to see his silk from the winner's circle, because Will Shamlian, who is one of his co-owners, races under a stable name of Los Pollos Hermanos, and he has the exact same insignia as on the Los Pollos Hermanos chicken stand from Breaking Bad on his silk. And I would love to see the silk from the winner's circle on Breeders' Cup Day.
Great show. You've got to love the pop culture and horse racing intersection there. Mike Hogan, meanwhile, showing us one of the very cool things about Formulator, the ability to integrate the workouts sequentially into the PPs. You got Masochistic with a holster full of bullets. Coming into the race, maybe you said part of the weakness is if you want to poke holes, oh, it's a 4-horse field, it's a 3-horse field. How good is he really? Well, this field for a Breeders' Cup Sprint is almost equivalently bare. Maybe it's just going to set up great for Masochistic after all.
It's now, the 7-horse field in the Breeders' Cup Sprint now officially the shortest field of any Breeders' Cup Sprint. Midnight Loot beat 7 before. Now we have 7 in here. And one other thing I'll mention about Masochistic, he is the son of an unraced sire out of an unraced dam. I mean, you want to talk about California Chrome coming from small expectations. I mean, how much more, or in terms of a horse built on hope, you've got an unraced sire, an unraced dam, who was gelded before he even raced, and now he's a Grade 1 winner. He could very well win the Breeders' Cup Sprint.
Great story.
It'd be nice if he won the Breeders'. It'd be fun if he won the Breeders' Cup. He'd finally be known for something more than the great betting coup in his second start at Churchill Downs after he had a fairly sympathetic ride in his debut here at Santa Anita.
Yep.
What a story. What a story that was. We'll let you check the drf.com archives to get all the particulars on it. The stuff out of a horse racing novel. And again, I said they made this observation in the run-up to the Breeders' Cup. So many stories that you could make movies out of in all these horses. I didn't even think about the masochistic movie when I originally said that, but that could be something else. I wonder who'll play AC Avila. Let's move on to the 7th race at Santa Anita on Saturday. It's the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint, 6.5 furlongs going down the hill. Jay Privman, we'll keep it with you and ask you what you think of this race. Is this a year where the Europeans might break through and take a Breeders' Cup Sprint, or is this another case where the California horses, the North American horses, might have a home field advantage?
Yeah, I like the North American horses better in here. I don't know that the Europeans that are in here are the best. I actually thought Lamada, when they were originally talking about bringing him over here for the Breeders' Cup a month ago, I thought this would have been like a really neat spot for him. Obviously, he's super live at the mile as well, but I thought the Turf Sprint might have been a really interesting spot for him, and I don't know that anybody else in here from Europe quite measures up to that level. Generally speaking, in these races, they're won by horses who have either run on the course or are kind of turn-back milers. Those are the kinds of horses that really excel in these downhill turf sprints. And I'm going to fool around in some exactas here with a couple of the locals who I think are going to run big on this course, and then a ship-in who I'm taking as my mild upsetter, and that's the filly Celestine, who's drawn outside, which is actually where you want to be on this course. And one of the reasons I like her is every time that she's been in a turf sprint, she's won. If you look at all of her races around one turn, with the exception of her first grass sprint, she's rattled off a series of wins, and she was second in that first grass sprint. But even the mile races at Belmont, especially the Just a Game, that just seems to be her game. And you might remember on Belmont Day, the course was really hard that day. It was really fast, producing fast times, and I think she's going to like the kind of grass course we have out here at Santa Anita. She got her run in last time in the First Lady. I have to figure she just needed that race. It was a means to an end. And I think she's got an upset chance in here. The other horses that I like and that I'm going to use in exacta boxes with her are a couple of old-time locals out here, including Ohm and Obviously, both turning back, both of whom I think will run big on this course, both in good form right now. And Obviously's run on this course was way back early in his career out here after he first came over from Ireland, but he's done it before. But Ohm has not sprinted on grass, but the one time he sprinted on synthetic, he ran off the screen. You might remember one of the horses he beat that day was American Pharaoh. And I think the turn back is really going to help him. So that's my exacta box in here. Celestine, Ohm, and Obviously, and with a little bit of win money on Celestine because I think she'll be a square enough price.
Mike Vesce, do you agree with Jay's view of this race? You have anything in particular you're looking to take a shot with in here?
That Jay Privman actually knows what he's talking about, huh?
I learned it all from you.
He made some great points with Celestine, especially the fact about the way that Belmont course was in the Just a Game that day. That was probably similar to what a California turf course would be like, replicated. So, you could give her a little bit of excuse against Protocol and the kind of a really weird race there in the First Lady after a long layoff. And, those real outside posts don't hurt you. The 14, 13 hole on these downhill sprints really don't hurt you. Some say it actually might be better than being inside. So he made some really great points with Celestine. I think she's a super, super nice filly, especially going that 7/8 kind of a distance, which is what this kind of is. I think a lot, maybe I've kind of, I've seen him too much, and maybe I'm a little bit biased on him, but he's trained really well coming into this. And he's another horse that 6, 7/8 mile cutback kind of horse that fits that profile that Jay was talking about earlier. And, Pure Sensation always shows up. He's shown up now the last 3 times. He's a pretty honest horse. Don't know how he's going to take to this new configuration, but a very, very tough race. These are usually my toughest races to come up with, but I think Celestine makes a lot of sense in here.
Mike Hogan, there are a couple of changes in this race. You were showing how you can use Formulator to remove horses, which can help save paper if you're still a Neanderthal like me who prints the thing, or just save room on your screen. Why don't you go over those scratches for us?
Yeah, so, boy, my French is horrible, so maybe you take a stab at pronouncing the name of the 7 horse who's scratched out of the race this morning.
Suédoise. That's my shot.
Okay, so scratch from Suédoise, and then Kieran McLaughlin mentioned that Lady Shipman would go in the Grade 3 Maddie on the undercard instead of going in the turf sprint, so she's not running, so I scratched her as well. Green Mask draws in from the also eligible list. You hit that save button, and you don't see them. You go to print them. They're not there. Like you said, Pete, it saves paper, and it saves just screen clutter. But one question we had, and it's kind of a general one for all the races at Santa Anita, but I think it's probably most pertinent maybe on the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint, which is such a unique course configuration. Ryan Stevens wants to know about thoughts on jockeys. Do local jockeys maybe have an advantage over some of the Europeans or some of the New York-based ones? Jay,
I mean, I
take that.
I would think so. Yeah, I mean, I would think they would, because just they've got more familiarity with it, and that was definitely in my thinking when it came to Celestine, because I know Rosario knows his course. He's won on it back when he used to ride out here regularly, and I do think it's a benefit to have ridden on it regularly as opposed to somebody who's coming in and is going to try it for the first time, because it's certainly a different kind of course, kind of course I should say, with got a soft right-hand turn about a quarter mile into the race. You've got a long left-hand turn coming down the hill into the stretch, and then you've got to go over the main dirt course, and then hook up with the main grass course coming through the stretch. It requires, I think, some familiarity. So yes, I do think it's an advantage to have been over the course a lot.
Makes sense to me, and something else to factor into our handicapping of the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. Race 8 is the BC Juvenile. Mike Vesce, what do we know about who's working well coming into the running of this race on Saturday?
Yeah, I can go right down the list of what I've seen. Syndergaard has been fantastic since day one. I thought he ran his absolute eyeballs out last time in the Champagne. I have a huge pace figure in that. He's come back twice with 2 B+. Excellent works. He's a very good-looking individual. He doesn't seem like a horse that this ship is really going to bother him too much. So I know there's some other speed in here, but I think he's going to show up with a big effort. Theory, he had a big, huge gallop out last time in the Futurity. He came back with a solid move, nothing on the 29th. It didn't blow me away, but it was solid. If you like him, bet him. If you don't like him, don't bet him. I'm not going to talk you on or off at all. Practical Joke is a horse that's, again, just very, very good consistently, although he benefited greatly in the Champagne last out when Syndergaard just battled just almost every step of the way on a hot pace. So, just as a handicapper really looking at this, I think it really sets up nicely for probably who's going to be the favorite, not this time, in Dale Romans. I have a huge figure on that Iroquois race, and between my colleague at Churchill Downs and Mike Welsh at Santa Anita, he's been training fantastically.
Great to hear. Jay, who did you come up with in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile?
Yeah, this is a race I really don't have a strong feel for. I'm going to go as deep as I can in terms of coverage for sequential wagers, because I can just see a number of horses winning the race. I really wanted to pick Syndergaard, as Mike Vesce was just referring to. I thought his last race was sensational with the pace that he carved out and still hanging in there at the end of the race. And if you want to read more about that race or some of the other preps coming into this, actually they were part of the Road to the Derby already. There have been 4 of those races run already, and if you go to our Road to the Derby page, I've got analysis of the Champagne up there and the Breeders' Futurity and the Iroquois and the Front Runner, so you can get, and it's all free, so you can get my thoughts on a number of the horses in this race that are coming out of all those races. I put on top in this race Classic Empire. If you consider that what happened in the Hopeful, he basically hadn't run for 3 months when he ran in the Breeders' Futurity last time, and I thought he was much the best that day. And I like the trip that he sat there, and that I think he's going to sit in this race, just right off the speed. He added blinkers last time to put him a little more into the race. He's 3 for 3 with Leparoux, and I just think he's the most likely winner of a wide open race. I have Syndergaard second. Not this time, as Mike Vesce was referring to. We've all been taken by the way he's trained out here. Mike Walsh is really high on him. We've got a couple of the Californians like Gormley and Klimt who certainly have the home court advantage. And I even give a look to 3 Rules. I mean, he's kind of a mystery horse, but I mean, he's romped in all his races. You don't know how good he is, and because of that, you'll get a higher price on him. I mean, imagine a horse with that record, but if it said Baffert or Fletcher on his trainer line instead of Pinchon, I mean, you get half the price. And I think he's off 6. He's certainly good enough. So I don't have a strong opinion in here. I'm going to go deep and just hope for the best price.
Mike Hogan, we have a question from the audience, I believe.
That was the question. Bill Fillmore wanted to know your thoughts on 3 Rules. So you took care of that, and I'll add, you might get half the price if the name of the trainer was Jerry Hollendorfer as well.
All right, let's move on to the Breeders' Cup Turf. Another situation where we have a pretty serious-looking European form to evaluate. Jay, do you give any of the North American-based runners a chance here against this very strong contingent of shippers?
Are we considering Flincher North American? Because if so, yes.
I was considering him European when I made that statement, but I guess you're right. He's been here a year and a half. I shouldn't have done that. I just wanted the clarification on where you're putting him, because that would certainly determine how I would look at him. So I'm going to call him, we've appropriated him as North American, and I'm going to say yes to your question. But I put him second to Found. Before Flincher came over here, he's obviously been a well-regarded horse, but I don't know that he was considered the kind of killer that Found is. And she, as good as she was last year, I just think she's been even better this year, running a lot, running against the very best horses, and even if she doesn't win, she's right there. Her Arc de Triomphe was terrific. She came back, and I thought she ran a very good race behind Al Manzour, both in that race and her race in the Irish Champions. She's just a world-class kind of horse, and I think they finally, after having her cross-entered in the Classic, they just decided, look, why are we messing around here? She's in a $4 million race in which she's going to probably be the favorite or the second choice. So, why are we messing around with her? So I like her to win this race for the second straight year. I did pick Flincher second. It's been well chronicled that he's much better on firm ground than the horse that he encountered last time in the Joe Hirsch Turf Classic, and he'll certainly get firm ground out here. I picked Highland Reel third, but I really think he's inferior to Found, and to me it's basically those those top two. The best value in here, a horse I think has a shot to get into the gimmicks and is going to be a higher price than he should be, is Money Multiplier. I just think this horse is raced in the shadow of Flincher all year long. He can't stand up on soft ground either, and he never ran a jump last time, but his price is going to be so much higher than it should be based on what his chances in this race are. And if I could get him into the gimmicks, I'd be thrilled, because I think you're going to get maybe 15 on him, and I think he's got a shot to be in the gimmicks. So I like Found best. Certainly respect horses like Flincher and Highland Reel, but Money Multiplier is my get into the gimmicks long shot horse. Question for you, just a quick follow-up about Found. Have you had an opportunity, Jay, to clap eyes on her in the morning? Just curious how she's doing with all the racing she's had.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen her just briefly the couple times she's been on the track. She got in late this week. The O'Brien horses shipped in about as late as anybody, and so she's had a couple of fairly easy mornings out here. But she looks fine to me, and I have enough trust in the horsemanship of Aidan O'Brien, that if she wasn't doing well, he wouldn't bother to bring her over here. He doesn't need to come over here and embarrass a horse with her record.
Yeah, and I mean, she did it last year and obviously got the job done, and clearly is an autumn filly who thrives on her racing. Mike Vesce, what are your thoughts on the Breeders' Cup Turf?
You know, Plound is obviously a major, major player in here. I do like Highland Rail. I think he you know, the one thing I don't like is these really heavily raced Europeans. These horses that, you know, she ran in the Arc, she came back in the Ascot. You know, she's raced a lot recently, and that's not something I particularly love to see in these Euro invaders. I, in fact, like to see them skip the Arc and then really point to the turf, but we don't have that really in here other than a horse like maybe Ulysses. But, you know, as a 3-year-old, I think it's going to be an awfully tough time to win this race. But just going back to Flintshire, you know, he obviously doesn't like, he likes it very firm, and he and Money Multiplier have worked together over the turf course at Belmont the last 2 weeks, but that was some giving the ground as well. They were just okay works. Flintshire was better than Money Multiplier both times. So, you know, I really can't get too creative in here. I think it's Flintshire. I think it's Found. I think it's Highland Rail. And, you know, just to mention Ecto real quick, he's a horse that, since he came to America, he really trained well for Todd Pletcher. I hated his first 2 races. I thought he really had no excuse in either of those 2, and I was really against in the Turf Classic, and what do you know, he wins by 5 lengths. So maybe he really likes the yielding course, and that's what bumped him up there. But I have to say that October 30th work over the turf course was probably the best I've seen from him since he got to the Todd Pletcher bond.
He has a little bit of a fan club, Ecto does, and I know some people listening will certainly be betting on him. It'll be interesting to see how he handles these very different conditions. All right, we've got just over 10 minutes left on the webinar. We still have 3 races to get to. The next one goes as the 10th. It's the Filly and Mare Sprint. Mike Vesce, what are you going to do here?
See, to me, this race is wide open. I really have. I probably have to look a lot harder at the West Coast horses in here. Have You Gone Away has gotten really, really good recently, but her speed figures aren't all that great. She is training well, but I think it's going to be awfully tough. Maybe Karina Mia, who I've always been a big fan of, maybe she shows that improvement late in her 3-year-old year to get over the edge.
Jay Privman, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I have no confidence in this race at all. I just don't have a strong feeling for the race. I picked Have You Gone Away just because I like her current form, but and I picked By the Moon second. But the thing that struck me just as a macro issue in this race is just the seeming lack of pace. I just don't see a whole lot of real pace in here, and I really tried hard when looking at this race to try and make a case in my mind to pick Glory Zapper. I just don't think she's quite this good, but I think from a pace standpoint, she may be the speed in this race, and maybe she'll get brave, but she's certainly going to have to run the best race she's ever run in her life in here. So I gave her a shot as well, but I don't have a strong feel for this race at all, and it's the kind of race that I'm going to have to go as deep as I can from a coverage standpoint, because I don't think I'm going to need a lot of, for me at least, in playing the late pick 4. I need to go deep in the juvenile. I don't need to go deep in the turf. I need to go deep in this race. And then, you know, the mile, I think I can hold down to a couple runners, and then you've got the classic. So I just don't have a good feel for this race at all. The more the merrier.
You talked about that late pick 4 sequence. Let's talk about the Breeders' Cup Mile, where the great race mare Tepin tries to win this for the 2nd year in a row. Quite a year she's had. Jay, who are those couple you want to include in your multis for the Breeders' Cup Mile?
Well, I certainly respect Tepin, and I think she can win, but I think she's another horse that, based on reputation, might end up being a little bit shorter than she should be, even though I guess maybe there's a little bit of bloom off her just because she got beat last time. But The horse that I like in here on top is Ironicus, and this again goes back to my thoughts on what happened on June 11 at Belmont Park, where the track, the ground was just really, really firm that day. And I thought he ran a sensational race to be second behind Flincher, going out to a distance I think a little beyond his optimum. I think a fast-paced mile is right in his wheelhouse. And he got a mile last time, but he didn't get a fast pace, and I think he'll get a faster pace in this race with some of the horses that are in here. He's certainly going to have to weave his way through some traffic because he likes to come from well out of it, but he's my top horse in here. Lamato is, I think, the best of the Euros, and he's certainly going to get a lot of support. He's kind of been the wise guy horse all week long. And I have a lot of respect for one of the locals here in Midnight Storm. He's just a tough horse to get by when he's on the lead. I can make a little bit of a case for him. So most of my money is going to be on Ironicus and Lamato, and then lesser percentages on Midnight Storm and just sort of a suicide prevention use of Tepin.
I love that concept in multi-race betting, suicide prevention horse. Mike Vesce, what are your thoughts on the Breeders' Cup Mile?
Yeah, I've always been a huge Ironicus fan, and it looks like Shug's taking it a little bit lightly here with the Breeders' Cup, really, with the ultimate goal, and Jay made some really good points. There's a very slow pace. He was rolling. So did Taurus, though, too. Taurus finished well in there. I'm going to try to beat Tepin here. I'm going to try to beat Tepin. I'm going to try to beat Miss Temple City. I have to really get into these Euros, but Tourist, Ironicus, they seem like the Americans that I want to use in this race.
Breeders' Cup Classic, of course, the final Breeders' Cup race, anchors everything down on Saturday. Mike Vesce, who do you want to be alive to in this race in your multi-race bets? Is it just the obvious two, or are you looking at maybe trying to get a little cute?
No, I'm not getting cute. I think the obvious two are really the only ones I want to win. If Frosted wins the race, I'm going to lose. And it's not a great betting race by any means. I'm just going to use those two to win, and that's pretty much it.
Jay, can you
the two, I mean, is California Chrome and Africa. Those are the two I mean.
I think we all knew. Jay,
okay.
Can you split Arrogant and California Chrome?
Yeah, I do think California Chrome is a better horse overall, but Arrogate is trained like a freak this week. And California Chrome, his races have just been sensational all year long. So Arrogate's going to have to run back to what he did in the Travers. This is a completely different level of quality that he's running against, but he's trained like he's going to run another monster race. You know, the difference is that he's not running against American Freedom and Gunrunner and Exaggerator this time. He's running against the best horse in the world. I think he's certainly capable of winning, but I think California Chrome is a more likely winner, and I, like Mike Vesce, am not getting cute in here. I'm just using those two, and if anybody else wins, then I will not be catching a pick four ticket. But in terms of, you know, an in-race kind of bet, a vertical wager, I can tell you that I think Opportunities look better than he ever has in his life. And he should get some pace to run into. I think he'll be rolling late in here. And I think you're going to see him run very, very well. And I'd even maybe use Melatonin in like the third spot or even the second spot. I'm very West Coast biased in this race. I think there's a very good chance that the first four slots could be taken by the four horses I just mentioned. I don't like the horses that are coming in from New York. I just think they're running against a much tougher group out here, and they're taking the worst of it by having to run against these horses on their home track.
I want to ask each of you about the pace scenario in this race. We had a spirited discussion this morning on the Matt Bernier show where two of us took the idea that Arrogate would go straight to the lead. Victor would be happy to let him clear and flop out and get that sort of trip that we associate with California Chrome from earlier in his career. The other two thought, no, Victor ain't giving up the lead. He's going to go. It'll be Arrogate stalking on the outside. Jay, which way do you see the pace shaking out here early?
Well, one thing that you guys apparently didn't consider is possibility of Melatonin being on the lead in here, which I think is a very real possibility. He hasn't run in 4 months. He runs on the lead. He's fresh. And of the two, between California Chrome and Arrogate, there seems to be a perception out there, and I guess it was brought up on your guys' panel this morning, that Arrogate is really, really fast. But he's really not. The only reason he showed that kind of speed last time in the Travers is because he was drawn on the rail. They needed to get him out of there because he's a big, long striding horse who the farther he goes, the better he gets. And remember, he had interference being run for him that day by his stablemate who was in the stall next to him, moving out as they came through the first quarter mile to clear a path for him. So the notion that, like, Arrogate is somehow going to outrun California Chrome, I don't see. I can see Melatonin being on the lead, and if he's not on the lead, I see California Chrome being on the lead. It's hard for me to envision Arrogate being rushed off his feet from the 10 post this time. So that's how I look at the pace.
Mike Vesce, what's your thoughts on how this pace is going to play out?
Yeah, I mean, there's really not much pace in here. I guess California Chrome will be on the lead. I like him slightly over Arrogate just because he's been so good lately and he's done it on a consistent basis. I thought the Dubai World Cup was his best race of his life, and you might be able to say that his last two races were just equally as good. So I like more the consistency from California Chrome. I believe he probably will be on the lead. And Arrogate is more of a horse that if he jumps up, it's hard to imagine he can do better than the Travers. But if he does jump up a little bit, he might be right there with California Chrome. But I do like California Chrome just because of his consistency this year.
It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Jay Privman, where can folks who want to see more of you this weekend for the 2 days of the Breeders' Cup find you?
Well, I'll be doing stuff on NBCSN both Friday and Saturday, so we're there. We're obviously on Twitter at DRF Privman, contributing with all the other people on site here to DRF Live. So we've got a lot of places to see our thoughts and opinions on things leading up and through the Breeders' Cup.
DRF.com, one-stop shop for all kinds of great handicapping information and reporting for the Breeders' Cup. Folks should get DRF Live or DRF Plus subscriptions. Make sure you get all the great content provided by Jay Privman. Mike Vesce, obviously your work will be included in the Clocker report. Can folks follow you through social media?
Of course, at DRF Vesce is my Twitter handle for Daily Racing Form.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure everybody listening is going to want to follow both of you guys and stay in tune with everything going on. I want to thank Jay Privman and Mike Vesce for taking time out again, giving us just some great stuff. If folks want to join, if you joined partway through and didn't hear me say this at the top, you can go to drf.com/YouTube for a replay of this webinar and all of our webinars. Lots of great handicapping information in those, from stuff we've done this week and before this week. There's some evergreen material on there as well that you're going to want to check out. I want to thank Mike Hogan for doing an excellent job putting together a fine week's worth of programming on DRF for the Breeders' Cup and all the work that he does. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, especially our sponsor, Keeneland Select. You've been watching a webinar brought to you by DRF.com.